What's up, YouTube? This your boy No More Gang Stalking. This is Freedom Voice, Trapped in a Black Box. I like these videos because they show the people exactly who they working for if they don't know already. This is who these people are out here gang stalking for.
That I did last week, Trapped in a Black Box, Growing Terrorism, Watch Listing, and Everyday Policing. In this document, it clearly spells out what I believe the targeted individual program is. Goes through a lot of details. We looked at the introduction in the last video. I want to kind of point out the nominations, how individuals are nominated into the watch listing or the KST file. And as we look at this document, I want us to realize the fact that, we targeted individuals are not the only ones speaking out on this issue. The ACLU and many others. It's just that we all sort of need to unite our voice, have a united effort. We really need to kind of get the word out, and that's the purpose of these videos. Not too long ago, I found on the F-Boys website, this is actually a screenshot that I took, I think it was about 2 years ago. It's not up anymore. If you go to the F-Boys website, you won't see this, but I did take a screenshot, and I want you to notice this screenshot. I want you to notice the categories here. I want you to notice the advertisement for surveillance careers. Notice what it says there at the bottom right there in the little box. It says surveillance careers, gather intelligence to further our mission. The eyes and ears of the F-Boys surveillance professional gather intelligence to identify domestic and international threats. And then on the next page, when you click on that, you can pull up this page here where it says careers in surveillance. This was actually on the F-Boys website. And I want to kind of go over this. I want to just read through it. It says here, to keep the nation safe and take on both domestic and international threat. The F-Boys relies on a constant stream of intelligence gathered by a team of surveillance professionals. Surveillance professionals work alongside case agents to discreetly gather intelligence in support of ongoing counterterrorism, foreign intelligence, and criminal investigations. Because of the nature of their work, candidates interested in pursuing a surveillance career must be comfortable in the following situations: traveling domestically on both operational and training missions, working in a team environment outside of a typical ordinary office setting, working nights and weekends as necessary, adapting to ever-changing work environment, working with photography and other electronic equipment. Surveillance professionals can practice either mobile surveillance or fixed surveillance. Now, this is where I really believe it really kind of goes into sort of the community stalking program here. It says mobile surveillance entails gathering intelligence and following subjects on foot, in a vehicle, on public transportation, or otherwise as needed. Fixed surveillance entails gathering intelligence in an office or indoor setting using technical equipment. F-Boys surveillance professionals must be willing and able to work in both environments. And then it tells you how to apply if you're interested in applying for this position. But, there's a lot here that in my mind is, I don't want to say questionable rather, but it's very obvious that it is questionable. For example, following someone on foot, I can understand, if a person's under investigation because they, committed a crime or they represent a national threat. But if you have a non-investigative subject where you don't have either the commission of a crime or if you have a person who doesn't pose a threat to the nation's security, then following them on foot, that's stalking. And that's exactly what's happening to targeted individuals. And then notice it says here in a vehicle, not only on foot, but in a vehicle or even on public transportation. See, this is the kind of the parameter by which all of the community stalkers, gang stalkers, actually work under. So if this does not include community stalkers or gang stalkers, then these people could essentially be hired for this job and labeled as community stalkers or gang stalkers because they're working in the community, they're following people on foot or in a vehicle or on the public transportation. The problem that we have as targeted individuals, the problem that we Americans have is that all of this is being done secretly. You know, they don't tell you why they're following you. They don't tell you why you're being the subject of surveillance. And yet this is advertised on the F-Boys website. Now I want to go back to that document, Trapped in a Black Box, Growing Terrorism Watch Listing in Everyday Policing. Again, it was put out by the ACLU. This is part 2. And I'm just going to go through a couple pages, and then we're going to sort of end with a clip from Tucker Carlson. Okay, as we continue this document, Trapped in a Black Box by the ACLU, I'm looking at section B here, Current Nomination Procedures and Criteria. And it reads there, as outlined in section 1, the current process for source agencies to nominate new entries is as follows. And then when you go over to the next page there, you look at number 1. It says the source agency submits names to either the F-Boys Domestic Terrorism or the NCTC International Terrorism. Okay, and that's number 1. And then number 2, the F-Boys or the NCTC reviews the nominations. Number 3, the F-Boys and the NTC submits approved names
F-Boys,
to the
FBI
TSC
boys.
for inclusion to the TSBD. Number 4, the TSC exports the TSDB entries to downstream database, including KST, formerly known as VGTOF. Again, this is how a person gets their name on the KST file. It goes on to say for entries that originate with an F-Boy field office, the nomination process is as follows, and this is very important. This, in my mind, explains the targeted individual program. It starts out, number 1, the F-Boy field office submits domestic and international nominations to the TREX. Okay, the TREX, number 2, technical information specialists review the nominations. Number 3, the TREX sends domestic nominations to the TSC and international nomination to the NCTC. Number 4, the NCTC enters the approved names into the TIDE database, which is then exported to the TSC. Number 5, the TSC conducts a final review and imports all approved entries to the TSBD. And then finally, number 6, the TSBD entry then flows downstream to databases, including the KST, formerly the VGTOF. Notice databases is pluralized. That means there's more than one database. That's why I was suggesting in the last video the fact that you have the KST file as well as you have domestic law enforcement databases, and you have federal law enforcement databases, which we can find in the fusion centers, I'm sure. Moving on, it says nominations for inclusion to the TSDB and therefore in the KST must meet a, quote, reasonable suspicion standard based on the articulable intelligence or information which, based on the totality of the facts, reasonably warrants a determination that the subject is known or is suspected to be or has been knowingly engaged in conduct constituting in preparation for, in aid of, or related to terrorism, terrorist activities. Nominating agencies are instructed to establish their own process for ensuring the quality and the accuracy of the nomination, and it is not clear how consistent or meaningful those agencies' quality control is. No entity ensures that the reasonable suspicion standard is consistently applied by the nominating officers or analysis. Notice what this is saying here. It's basically saying that there are nominating agencies that can be questionable as it relates to reasonable suspicion. Goes on to say, as explained in greater detail below, the reasonable suspicion standard is deeply problematic for numerous reasons, including that it permits the use of uncorroborated, questionably reliable information, necessarily entails a significant risk of error, and makes it likely that individuals will be nominated for and included in the TSDB or the KST based on conduct that is innocent or protected under the First Amendment. Continuing, it is not clear what, if any, guidelines govern the nomination of source agencies other than the F-Boys. According to the 2014 OIG report, however, 3 categories of individuals can be nominated by the F-Boys for the inclusion in the KST file. Okay, I want to go over these 3 categories because I believe these 3 categories are very, very important, especially number 3. Number 1, subjects of full investigation. Number 2, subjects of preliminary investigations. And number 3, the most important one, the one that I believe directly applies to targeted individuals, non-investigative subjects. Now we're going to look at each one of these categories, but I want you to know category number 3 is really, really important. Very important. And you'll see why here in just a minute. Going to continue reading. Category number 1, full investigation. It says full investigations are authorized when there are specific and articulable facts giving the reason to believe that a criminal activity or a threat to national security may exist. All right, so number 1, subjects that are under the full investigation, they basically have criminal activity. It's clear. All right, it goes on to say subjects of full investigations are presumed to meet the reasonable suspicion standard because of the F-Boys' internal criteria for expanding a preliminary investigation to a full investigation. Now, number 2, preliminary investigation. All right. Here's what it says about preliminary investigations. It says preliminary investigations are authorized when there exists any allegations or information indicative of possible criminal activity or threats to national security. So anyone who has known criminal activity or they pose a threat to national security, they do what's called a preliminary investigation. It says, thus, the F-Boys initiate a preliminary investigation when it does not have enough evidence to meet the standard for a full investigation. Yet it may nevertheless nominate individuals under the preliminary investigation for inclusion in the watch list. Indeed, subjects of preliminary investigations may not meet the reasonable suspicion standard for watch listing. As with the watch listing criteria, the F-Boys guideline for preliminary investigations are vague and overboard, permitting intrusive investigation of people for lengthy periods, even when the government does not have facts to meet its own low reasonable indication standard for showing that anyone has violated the law. So, a person can actually be put on, preliminary investigation when they don't have enough facts, and then they can bump them up to what's called a full investigation as they get more facts. But what this is saying here is that, a lot of times the information that they use for a person under the preliminary investigation phase, it doesn't even meet the reasonable suspicion standard. Category number 3, a third type of nomination. The non-investigative subject nomination allows for the nomination of individuals who are not the subject of an open F-Boy investigation. And again, I just want to reiterate the fact that this third nomination, the non-investigative nomination, directly applies to the targeted individual. Goes on to say, although the specific criteria for who may be nominated as a non-investigative subject are unclear, these nominations could include names that the F-Boys received from foreign governments through legal attaches and from other agencies such as the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA. One document from the FOIA production describes non-investigative subject nominations by the F-Boys headquarters as individuals who are on the radar, but not currently under investigation. Now, keep in mind these non-investigative subjects that the F-Boys detail here. It includes individuals who are, quote, on the radar. Now, that's very interesting. How do you get on the radar? Who gets on the radar? It goes on to say, but are not currently under investigation. A 2009 OIG report found that the review process for such nominations is weak and non-existent. Similarly, a 2014 OIG report found that the F-Boys could not readily provide an accurate accounting of the actions that were taken regarding the watch listing of non-investigative subjects. All right, so it's almost as though they've got these non-investigative subjects here, and they can't really account for why they're investigating them. They can't account for anything that they did wrong, but they're on the radar. They're on the radar. As the foregoing analysis makes clear, the F-Boys watch listing practices for non-investigative subjects are ripe for abuse and permit the inclusion of names submitted by foreign governments as well as domestic, which may have their own reasons for seeking to watch list dissidents and opponents under standards that fall short of the F-Boys' already low threshold for nominations. And you know, that's the reason why I'm sort of bringing this out here. That's the reason why I'm kind of sort of bringing up this document. It's because it's not only foreign governments that do this. Definitely, you know, local governments, federal government, government agencies can also include people for nomination to the non-investigative phase of this watch listing program. And these individuals can be targeted, surveilled, harassed, even crimes committed against them, and have no recourse, no way of contesting, no way of seeking justice for what is taking place in their life. At this time, I'm going to continue with another clip. This clip was put out by Tucker Carlson. It basically shows how the F-Boys sort of see the traditional Catholics now as a threat. And I want to emphasize, friends, that you know, it's the traditional Catholics now. Very soon it's going to be the Christians next. And that's what prophecy brings out in the Bible. It brings out those that live godly in Christ Jesus will suffer persecution. That persecution is not only from powers that be, as the Bible does say, but it also can include individuals who are unjustly placed on a watch list, individuals who are declared to be a terrorist because for whatever reasons, their life, their belief system doesn't line up with the politically correct narrative for the time.
In this weird inverted world that we're living in, the criminals are actually the victims. So who are the criminals? Well, obviously, sincere Christians. They're the real problems. Sincere Christians, the middle class, boy, they're dangerous. And the FBI, it's hard to believe this, doubtless there are decent FBI agents, but the FBI as an organization has joined in the hunt for Christians. We have proof of it. The FBI tried to manufacture crimes against sincere Catholics. The FBI's Richmond field office recently published an internal document promising to punish, quote, radical traditionalist Catholics and their ideology. Now, just to make something completely clear, the Bill of Rights prohibits the government from weighing in on sectarian or religious questions. They don't get to decide whether your religion is good or bad. They have to be agnostic on it. But the FBI has decided if you're too sincere about Catholicism, you're a criminal. The document cites obvious lies from the fascist and dishonest Southern Poverty Law Center several times. Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public, and we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's hard to believe this is even real. This is one of those. What was your reaction when you saw this?
Well, my reaction is predictable. I mean, I'm a Catholic, number one, and I think it's appalling. It's one of those things that when the government has gotten to the point where you talked about our Second Amendment rights, and those defend our First Amendment rights to practice our religion, particularly the way that we want to. I'm friends with people who love the Latin Mass. I grew up in a traditional school where I actually learned Latin in 5th and 6th grade and all the way through high school. And it doesn't seem reasonable, but it is the state of the FBI at this point that they're so desperate to find white supremacists that they're going to look at the Catholic Church. But I think if we're realistic about it, what they're doing is they have found a gateway in what they think is fringe Catholicism in order to move into Christians in general and declare them to be the actual the criminals in this country or the potential terrorists. And that's what I think we're seeing. Because the whole document basically is written from the perspective of somebody who thinks that there are significant abortion rights that need to be defended and also an LGBTQ agenda that has to be pushed down the American people's throats. And those are antithetical to Catholicism. So it's pretty easy. It's an open door into Christians in this country, which is pretty much all the country.
Well, yeah, and also Orthodox Judaism and Islam and Mormonism. I mean, they're right. And did no one in the FBI say, whoa, wait a second. It's not our job to decide which is a better religion and criminalize people's religious belief. Did anyone in your world within the Bureau say that?
Well, obviously, the whistleblower who brought it to me. So I'm in contact with a number of people who work in the FBI and have the same values that probably you and I do. And so, you know, they brought it to me. One of them brought it to me and said, this is a problem. And this person is not a Catholic. But he or she stated the very simple statement, which is that if they're going to go after radical traditional Catholics, then radical traditional Baptists are next, and radical traditional evangelicals, and anybody else that espouses essentially what is radical, which is just a Christian faith. And that is dangerous, apparently, in this country.
No more gang stalking.